want to see that by being a good steward of our body, which is also being a good steward of our brain, that the goal is to live fruitful lives for the Lord.
Welcome, everyone, to Breaking Bread, the podcast brought to you by Apostolic Christian Counseling and Family Services. Excellent, as always, to have you along. My name is Matt Kaufman, and with me is Ted Witzig. Welcome, Ted.
Hi, Matt.
Great to have you here.
Oh, it's good to be here.
Our topic today is improving brain health.
Yes.
This idea that I could do something about the health of the brain is welcome.
I agree, Matt. One of the things that's most interesting about thinking about a topic like this is that it is so much a part of who we are. So when somebody struggles with their kidney, we don't identify ourselves with our kidney. Like I am not my kidney, that's my kidney, okay? Yeah. But it's fascinating because as people have problems with concentration or experience depression or have brain fog or something like that, they will oftentimes associate it with themselves.
Take that personally.
They'll take it personally.
Yeah.
And then the mysterious, majestic coming together that God made us as body, soul, and spirit, somehow our body, our physical body, and our emotional self and our spiritual self somehow come together. And the fascinating thing is that we align that most closely with our brain. Mm. People, or sometimes they'll say your heart, but even when somebody says their heart,
we don't think the organ.
They don't think the organ of the heart. So it's very interesting how much the brain is on one hand aligned with who we are, and on the other hand, we don't think about its maintenance a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably philosophize about this. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like it thinking about itself. It seems a little strange, right? And there's metrics with the heart, for example.
Sure.
You go in and you can get EKG or whatever. Sure. Is that what it's called?
Yep.
Okay, got that right. And do some actual numbers.
Sure.
Like, oh, this is your numbers. This is your blood count. This is your cholesterol. You can do that with breathing and all that. So there's metrics for these other organs, and I'm wondering if that's part of my hiccup.
Yeah, sure.
Is there's not the metrics that I run my brain through, and then it's like, ooh, these things are wrong.
Yeah, and I think not only that, Matt, but it is a coming together of multiple systems of the body that, and it's true of other organ systems, but if you think about it, the brain has structure. It's about 3 pounds. It's made about 60% of fat. It's got 2 hemispheres. It's got so there's a structure to it that has different components. Then there's the neurochemicals. We call them neurotransmitters that are going to dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, all these different ones, acetylcholine, all these different things. And then there's an electrical system in the brain is electric, okay? And the communication in the brain is going through electricity. And then on top of that, there's all these blood vessels and the transfer of oxygen and taking fuel into the brain and waste out of the brain. And
vascular in that sense.
That's vascular, yes. So as we're talking about this, all these systems are happening. And then here's the interesting part. Then they affect other systems and other systems affect it. So when we talk about the brain also, should say this, that we're really talking about the brain and the spinal cord because it is connected out then down through into the chest and abdomen and then out into the peripheral nervous system.
It's just really, really fascinating. Speak to this. Discoveries being made all the time.
Oh my.
As it concerns neurology. Am I right about that?
Absolutely.
I mean, give us a little tenure of your time as a psychologist.
Absolutely. When I started in this field, it was everybody knew you were born with all the brain cells you would ever have, and you would never make another one. Everybody knew that. That was established fact. And today, we absolutely know that that's not fact at all. It is that neurogenesis, new brain cells being made, and neuroplasticity, the brain shifting and growing and changing over time, is the accepted model. And I think that another thing that's really changed is that there was no way that we could change trajectories. So what I mean by this is, so like when you think about people getting older, in fact, just this week, a study came out that said the rate of dementia in the United States was going to essentially double over the next number of years. Let me make sure I got that. Yeah, it was that the U.S. dementia cases are supposed to double in the next 40 years. That was just a study that came out this past week. Now that's staggering. Here's the interesting thing about that, okay? That part of the reason that is happening is because of not what's happening in old age, okay? It's about what's happening in middle age and younger age, okay? And so what happens is this, is that we would be amiss if we thought like this: everybody just gets old and gets dementia. That's just what happens. There's no question that our brains change over time. There's some cognitive decline over time and things like that.
And there's some genetics. Is that true?
There's genetic pieces, and that's another piece we should bring into this whole factor. But here's the interesting part to that, is that while we can't control all things, the fact is that if I live for 50 years eating Cheetos and drinking Red Bull, and that's my main diet, it's not going to be a good outcome, okay? Now, again, we're all going to know somebody who ate Cheetos and drank Red Bull for 50 years and lived to be 103, okay?
But they're an anomaly.
They're an anomaly. We're also going to know somebody who took really good care of themselves and got a serious disease and died young.
And they're an anomaly.
Yes. And so the thing about it is, the goal here is to think about why would we care? And first of all, we want to acknowledge that the brain is part of God's creation of us, that we're fearfully and wonderfully made. The second thing is that we are stewards of our bodies. And being stewards of our bodies is what helps us to go and do and be the people that God created us in this world. We want to see that by being a good steward of our body, which is also being a good steward of our brain, that the goal is to live fruitful lives for the Lord. That doesn't mean that somebody that has a condition that limits them can't live a fruitful life for the Lord. We're all have something. We're all dealing with something. So my goal is to say, what is it that we can do that puts us in the best space we can be across the lifespan to serve the Lord and bless others? That's ultimately that's what this is about. It's not just about
this podcast. We're gonna. I'd like you to share some ways to build health, and I know that's what your intention.
That's
to build
right.
Brain health. I appreciate you making that comment, the commentary about the anomalies.
Mm-hmm.
As an armchair statistician, I can appreciate stats on the masses.
Yeah.
When the population gets an hour more sleep,
we
see a marked difference in the population. Now, individual to individual. But we are able to see. So the things you're going to share here today are really research based.
Yes, they are,
and they find themselves as verified in the large data.
Yes, and that's where we can learn from that, and then everybody's got to figure out how to apply it in their lives. It's not going to look the same in your life if you're listening to this at 25, at 50, at 75, at 100. It's going to look different, and that's okay. But what we want to do is be able to say, how can I live into this in some small way? And that's really the key. Is it's not about living some perfect life where you never have birthday cake. Okay, I am not advocating that everybody has to learn how to run a 26.2 mile marathon
and go without sugar.
It's not that. Okay, so Matt, I think that as I've kind of broken it down, as I think about it, there's different core areas that are going to be ones that, and I'll say this, most of our listeners are going to go, oh, that's what the doctor tells me I'm supposed to do. Well, there's a reason that they do.
Yeah. Let's start with one.
All right. So the first is physical exercise. And physical exercise does several things for our brains. Okay, and it does it through different channels, okay? And so first of all, one of the major things about physical exercise is that its effect on the heart and blood pressure. Okay. One of the things we know is it affects mood. It affects the brain's activity level and even our ability to learn. So when we're thinking about this, the main recommendations right now for adults is about 150 minutes of moderate intensity activity. So
and that is per what?
Per week.
Okay.
Okay. So that's about 5 days a week of a half an hour.
Oh, that's not too much.
Or 75 minutes of high intensity exercise a week, plus 2 days of some kind of strengthening exercises that are going to move the different body systems, like, your abs, legs, arms, those things. So we're maintaining muscle tone.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you think about it, it's really about trying to do something most days of the week, okay, that are manageable. Okay. Now I want to encourage listeners to think about it this way. I really encourage you to think about 2-for-1s and 3-for-1s. And what I mean by that is this. One of the things we're going to talk about later is social connectedness. But see, when you walk for a half an hour with a friend, okay, now you've got social connectedness. And if you encourage one another spiritually, okay,
yeah,
you see what happens?
You're compounding the difference.
You're compounding the difference. That's right.
Yeah. All right. Let's even connect the dots. Our exercise affects mood. It affects even our ability to learn. Why? Because that's seated in the brain. And since it's vascular, you're pushing blood through there. You're getting oxygen freely there. Like you are feeding that organism.
That is correct. Anything that you do good for the brain is going to be good for your heart. And anything you do good for your heart
will be good for the brain.
Is going to be good for the brain. And the other thing that exercise does is it helps us as we're trying to manage things like in our bodies, like stress. It's a stress reducer and an inflammation reducer, and that's a big deal in a very chronically stressed society.
All right, so Ted, I'll give a personal example of this. It was a year ago. I mean, it was a weak moment for me, but my wife asked me, Matt, will you start to run with me? She needed a little motivation. She's like, okay, maybe if he can help me and all of that. And I don't know if it happened to be the music that was playing in the background that provoked me to say yes to that question, but I have, and I'm not a good runner, but there has been some consistency.
Yeah,
and you know what, Ted? It has helped me think clearer.
Yeah.
And in fact, I would even go further. I have spiritually broken through and have been able to forgive a certain matter that's been hard for me. Mm-hmm. And it's not because I was running. Yeah. That's not where it was at. But there was good devotion time while running. Yep. But I found my thoughts starting to be collected with my rhythm of my heartbeat and the pounding of my feet. Does that make sense?
It does.
Like there was like some alignment going on that let loose me to connect with God in a way that was that I'm super thankful for.
Yeah. I think one of the things that you're talking about there, Matt, is that there is a cascade effect to these kind of things. And so the cascade effect of running gives you the time to, it puts your mind and body in a rhythm, and you had time to think, and, all those things, and time with God and compounding, then it's that. And I think the key is, Matt, that we would never say that it is, just like saying that with diet, that eating one day of birthday cake is gonna make all it's gonna throw everything off, or missing one day of running, or even running one day. But it's kind of the patterns that are established. And I think people are fearful sometimes that if they don't think they can commit forever, then they don't want to start.
Yeah.
Or they're worried that that nothing will matter or whatever. And I think that we just have to figure out how we steward ourselves today and this week.
And what does it look like for me?
And what does it look like for me? And you know what? My dad has polio. Had polio when he was 4 years old, and he's not. And in his mid-70s, he's not going to be a runner, and it's okay. He doesn't have to be. He has to work with his physician to figure out what his routine is. And so we're not putting any guilt on people. And in fact, I think the thing is to say, at your age, at your, whatever, then the question is, how do you lean in? And you know what? For some people, that's going to be chair exercises that they sit in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think another thing, Matt, if we can go to the next one, is our diet and nutrition. And there's two things about this that I want to say. First of all, people have different diets for different reasons, and that's understandable. And we're going to, again, say that goes back to everybody. But the typical American diet, the typical American diet is highly processed, and it's sometimes now we're even talking, there's been research recently about ultra-processed foods and things of that nature. There's no question an ultra-processed diet and dementia risk is linked. Okay. So the thing about it is, I'm not telling you can't eat some potato chips.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not telling you that. I am telling you though that when we have to figure out how we lean, we really the things that and specifically when they do research on healthy brain things, and for myself, even after I had a small stroke and had some migraines, the neurologists are like, I want you to follow a Mediterranean diet. Okay, and there's another diet called the MIND diet that's very similar, and it focuses on the things that you would anticipate, right? It's olive oil, it's salmon, it's nuts, it's leafy green vegetables.
There was the word vegetables. Yes. I thought it might be coming.
Yeah. And you know what? The thing about it is, and the point is this, that the question isn't one meal. The question is about nutrition over time.
Yeah, lifestyle.
The lifestyle and over time. And that's where I think the thing is that it's not a question in our society about whether there's going to be a range of foods available. We're going to get all the kinds of things. You go to potlucks and whatever. But I think one of the things to remember is that the brain is very responsive to the amounts of things that we put into it. And for different people, it's going to be different. But I will tell you this, that if you think about it, the brain actually, even though it's not moving like your muscles move, your brain consumes a ton of energy. Okay? Yeah. It is constantly processing and moving and things of that nature. And when it is powered effectively, it does a better job.
And you know what? I think for a long time we've connected diet with physical, right?
Sure.
I mean, because we have some very, there, going back to measurable, we have variable step on the scale, and we can measure the effect of the diet. But I think the freshness right here is to recognize that our brain is also a beneficiary of our diet. We are what we eat, as some have said.
That's correct.
And to see that link there, which often is a little bit off our radar.
Yeah.
We kind of measure other things that are important to measure.
Sure. And I think the thing to remember, Matt, is this is where parents can influence their children. And again, I am going to be the last to tell you that you should be an ogre about this. Very soon, Donna and I are planning to become grandparents. Here, we got a grandchild coming soon, and I am planning on spoiling that little one. So the thing about it is, but it is about teaching. It is about teaching. It is about lifestyle over time. The other thing that I want to say, Matt, and this is where the exercise and the nutrition can be made. There's something bring it more measurable. Okay. Then the third area is about monitoring your medical risks. There are multiple areas that everybody should know, okay? And the younger we are, the more we don't think about these things. But over time, they become more and more important. But I will say that what we're finding is that these are happening more and more in the young. So the things, your blood sugar level, okay? Your A1C, particularly blood sugar, because problems with blood sugar are related to diabetes, number one, but then the downstream effects of diabetes affect all of our body systems and your brain.
Okay, so you're going to be able to detect real quickly what group I'm in.
Yeah.
Is that something that you go to the doctor and find it out, and you do that like once a year and update that number, or is that something you take at home?
Yep. So that's something. So when you go to your healthcare professional and have a blood test, that's kind of the annual physical kind of a thing. And so the things that they're oftentimes testing, your blood glucose level is one, and there's different tests, and that's up to your healthcare practitioner. Another one is cholesterol. Okay, there's no question that even though the brain is made out of 60% fat, the fact is you can clog those arteries and create strokes with the wrong kinds of. There's good and bad fats and that kind of thing. So cholesterol is another one. Okay, another number that we want to keep on has to do with our weight. Okay. And again, I'm not trying to tell you what you have to be, and there's different body styles and all those things, but we do know that keeping our weight in a certain range and ranges is going to be healthier versus unhealthier over time. Last one is one you're not going to have on your radar, Matt, and that's your hearing.
What?
Okay? Yes, what?
Hearing, seriously.
Your hearing. And that is...
There's a connection between...
There is a connection between dementia and hearing loss.
Really?
Yes. And
for whatever reason the hearing loss is, like if it's running loud equipment or if it's irrespective of reason?
So hearing loss, and again, this is one of those things that one of the things that I find is that as people get into middle age and they start to notice things and they're self-conscious about, well, I need hearing aids, well, I don't want them, and different things like that. I'm going to tell you from a brain health perspective, you want to hear. Okay.
Is it because you're getting stimuli? You're able to be more present and you're taking in more stimuli at any given time, and so your brain has got to be active in all of that sorting?
And it has to do with the brain. And they're trying to figure all this out, but the parts of the brain that process memory, okay, are oftentimes involved in language and other things. I will tell you the last number that you need to know. I'm going to shift that, and that is your blood pressure. Okay. Blood pressure that's out of a healthy range is not good for your brain. Again, we're talking about particularly stroke risk, but we're talking about a lot of just your brain's health in general. So those numbers are easily accessible. Your weight, your blood sugar, your cholesterol, and blood pressure, easily accessible. People generally don't get a hearing test until they notice some kind of an issue. But the fact is, the research is pretty clear on that one. The next thing that we really need to think about, Matt, is sleep. Okay? It has been a status symbol for years and years and years to be so busy that you don't need to sleep or to just run on caffeine and whatever. And I would just say this, that again, the research is also clear that sleep is necessary for a healthy functioning brain. And I think the status symbol that we should aim for is to have good sleep. And what research shows is that getting sleep, this is at the population level again, but getting less than 6 hours of sleep on a regular basis or more than 9 hours of sleep on a regular basis is unhelpful and unhealthy for brain health. Now, we're all going to have nights we don't get.
But you had a less than and you had a greater than.
That's correct.
So more than 9.
That's correct.
It's too much over the population.
Yes.
Really.
What it oftentimes signals is somebody isn't active or somebody is depressed or other things.
What's research say on this is what's happening at sleep during sleep?
There are several really key things that are happening during sleep that we have to understand. Number one, memory consolidation happens during sleep. Okay? It is where your brain is filing and sorting. It is going through it's trying to make sense of. It is pruning. Your brain is actually going through many different kinds of activity during sleep. That's why super interrupted sleep, or things of that nature can really get in the way of things for people. It's why, and that's where I would also say this: we're going to have times of disrupted sleep. That's going to happen. Those things happen. But when people have things like insomnia, and that goes on for a long time and it's untreated, or they have sleep apnea and things of that nature, or they're just not they're not taking time for sleep. The other thing I wanted to say about sleep is it's part of the brain has to also be able to clean itself, and it's producing things, and so as the brain and exercise seems to help with this, sleep seems to help with this. It is doing its processing of bringing in the good, getting out the extras.
Is there much on quality? So let's say, how about nap? Is a nap a good idea, even though you're probably, depending on how long it is, you might not reserve enough time to get into deep REM sleep, for example?
That's a really good question. I think it varies by the person, and it also varies by the length, and it varies by the length of the nap, and it varies by the time of the day. And so the point is, you can be, if you take a 2-hour nap late in the day, you're going to be starting to rob your sleep at night and throw off your sleep cycle. Again, some people are just like, hey, they need that power nap and it really helps them. And I'm not here to say that it doesn't. I would also say, though, that what we're aiming for is to be able to get quality sleep. It doesn't help to try to make yourself sleep, but I will tell you this, that there are a lot of tools and resources to help with sleep, and people have it's one of those areas that people are kind of like, yeah, I just don't sleep good, and that's really frustrating and it's hard. But here's one of the things we do. We go to our screens, okay? And so then people are on their screens at night and things of that nature, and this is creating a whole cycle of unhelpful sleep and rest. It's interesting, Matt, that God made our body to rest. He built us to live inside of rhythms. He built, work and rest, day and night, all those things. And I will also tell you an interesting thing, and you know this already, but in the Hebrew way of thinking, the day started at night. At sundown was when things, is like that sleep, that rest, and remembering that God is in control of the world.
Yeah. There's something, I think, really fascinating that every human on earth goes comatose. Yeah, is as close to death as you can come by all measurements. But we all need to.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter how powerful or what decisions that you have to make. It has to wait till the next day.
That is correct. Rest in general, though, to be able to quiet our minds is a really important part of this. As busy as we are, as attached to screens as we are, and I'm glad Donna's not in the room with me here, because she would be saying, "Hey, why don't you try that at home?"
but to it's have hard. I guess to respect that our brains are always on the job.
Yeah,
always on the job.
That is correct.
And doing and working hard, as you mentioned, burning calories, a ton of energy.
Yep.
And so it's not that hard of a leap to say, yeah, it's tired.
Yeah. And here's the other part, Matt, and this is hard for us to believe. Those breaks in mental energy to pause, to reset, to quiet actually improve our ability to function well. We're able to recenter ourselves on Jesus. We're His presence.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that as a spiritual discipline to think about being present with God and God is present with us, it's essential.
Yeah.
But it goes out the window pretty fast.
It's a centering moment.
Yeah.
Great. I think we've mentioned 5. Is that true?
So we mentioned 4. We're on to 5 right now. And so mental fitness is the next one. So one of the things that over time that we want to do is that we want to keep our brains learning. We want our brains interacting with the world. And there's lots of different ways to do this. And we think about it when we're young. We're trying to get the kids minds they're learning, and they're learning all these different things. But it's important to remember that that the concept of being a lifelong learner is really healthy for your brain. Now, that can take the form of simple things like doing Sudoku puzzles, right? That's kind of a classic example, crosswords and Sudokus and things like that. But it can also be things like the mix of things like going to a museum and learning, playing an instrument, okay, learning a language. These kind of things they're challenging the brain. So here's the thing I want you to...
So variety might be helpful?
So research shows that variety is helpful. Okay. It doesn't mean that you have to become an expert in all these things, but I will tell you that we become more passive as learners over time, or we can. And the other thing is we've got this mindset sometimes that old dogs can't learn new tricks. I would say it this way. I would encourage everybody to be a lifelong learner, okay? And in doing so, it doesn't mean you have to be a lifelong expert. Learn, be curious, ask questions.
So now what I hear from this too, and maybe hearkening to the left and the right hemisphere, which we understand to have different, but to say, as I listen, I'm like, okay, Matt, step into some logic and step into some art.
Yeah.
Is that a healthy thing? That's the variety we're talking about.
That is the variety we're talking about. It's sometimes doing things that require memory tasks, sometimes that require planning, that require right and left side. It's just it's about it's about that wholeness. Yeah, go.
Well, and it also harkens back to your introduction as we talked about the complexity of this. What did you say? 3-pound organ with its, I don't know what the number is of cells and connections and that type of thing.
Billions and billions.
Billions and billions. Okay, we're talking billions and billions.
Yeah.
And then, just to look at it mathematically, the permutations of connections and routes makes every brain infinitely unique.
Absolutely.
And really what you're saying is practice that uniqueness, really light it up.
Yep. That is correct, because if you think about it, it is the more connections we have in our brain cells, that's more connections equals healthier when it comes to brains.
Yeah.
Okay?
Good.
Last piece.
Number 6.
That I want to say is about social interaction and social connectedness. We're created social. The fascinating thing is most of these things that we've been talking about really have to do with what's going on inside of us.
Yeah.
Right?
We have
what's our blood pressure, what we take into our body, all those things. This is about what happens outside of us. And this is about having connections with other people. And there's a couple reasons why this is the case. First of all, research is showing that loneliness is a plague in our society and around the world. Loneliness is at highest levels. The research on this actually shows that chronic loneliness has the health impact of smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Wow.
Okay? When you look at, again, the outcome, and everybody's like, oh, yeah, it would be better. The fact is that as people, and oftentimes as people age, the loneliness factor goes up, but loneliness is plaguing in the young as well.
Yeah.
So it is about, and this is where churches and families and things of that can really be helpful. But over the course of time, the outcome for the lonely, they tend to be more sedentary, pull back and all those different kind of things. This does not mean that everybody has to be an extrovert, okay? But here's the thing. When we're connected, we have a sense of warmth and attachment. We're also more likely to, when we struggle, have support, okay, or to offer support. That goes both directions. And the fascinating thing is that, again, this is one of those areas that when you look at social connectedness versus isolation and then outcome out years and years and years, it's not even close, Matt. It's not even close. The beauty of this is we can help one another in these areas. And it just means that as we kind of encourage one another to live our lives in a way that stewards ourselves well and is a blessing to others, the social support aspect is just part of the mutual benefit that we have.
I really like that. And there's so many reasons, I think, for that benefit. And I'm just going to narrow on this neurological one, which makes sense to me, right? That if we're in and of ourselves, we have our own world. This is complex. But as soon as you engage with another world, another person, the complexity just compounds.
Yeah, sure.
And then add another person in the room. And so you see the brain has got to flex. Mm-hmm. It's got to work. It's got to light up. It's got to run different routes. Yeah. The more people or whatever that. So I can see just purely from the organ standpoint, like why that's the case.
Yeah. And just think about then when we're together, Matt, and we recall memories together. Okay.
Yeah.
So
you feed off one another.
We feed off one another.
It's like another pair of ears, another nose, another mouth, another set of eyes, right?
It is, and it's helping in that way. One of the things that I would encourage our listeners is that you don't have to become an expert in the brain and all these different things. But I do encourage everybody to think about that there are some practical things that they can do to help in these areas. And so one of the things that I really like, and I'm just going to recommend we can put a link to it on the show notes, is that you can get a brain care score from the McCants Center for Brain Health at Massachusetts General. They have a 20-item
questionnaire.
It's going to ask you. You can take it right online. And it's going to ask you where you're at in some of these numbers and your social connectedness, and it's going to ask a number of these things. And when it does, it'll give you ranges, and then it'll allow you to see where you can grow. Okay, or for example, if you don't know a number, it can help you to figure out what numbers you need to know. Or if you find out, my blood pressure and cholesterol and weight are higher than they ought to be, and I'm sedentary and alone. Okay, what are the steps that I need to start taking? And again, we're talking about lifestyle, but the other thing is, I really think too that we want to promote in and amongst ourselves a kind of living that puts us in a place to be able to serve and do it with joy.
I really like that. I appreciate this, Ted. Very practical. And as I think about. And what I really like about it, Ted, is some of these things are really within reach. Mm-hmm. As I think about, okay, if I can get out every day, if I can move, if I can connect with people, if I can, eat something healthy, be healthy, get good sleep at night. Actually, this package looks pretty good.
Yep. I think, Matt, that all of these things are in that category of, to some degree, people will be going, Ted, I already knew everything that you said.
Yeah.
And so there's a big difference, Matt, between the knowing and the doing. And all we have to do, though, is we can then take that and put that into some action, just whatever the next steps are for you.
Yeah. God has wonderfully created each of us, and I think that's been highlighted here, Ted, in our brain. And I think it's easy to get on board to say, yes, I want the healthiest brain possible.
There you go.
It makes a difference. So thanks, each one, for being on. And we trust that this has been helpful for you and perhaps giving you some practical things to step into to have a healthy brain that God has given you. Thanks, each one. Goodbye.